Hey everybody, this is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated, the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's great to be with you. Good Thursday. I think it's Thursday. No, today's Wednesday. Sorry, man, week's flying by. Um, Very special announcement. We are going to have a very special guest on Monday's podcast. Don't miss it. Very special guest. You don't want to miss it. I'll give you a hint, more hints to Thursday, more hints on Friday. Then you got to wait till Monday. But a very, very, very special guest. Every single Raider is going to want to watch, and you're going to love it. All right, I want to break it down now. We're going to talk about Pete Carroll and the staff, um, and the expectations on this staff. Now, Pete Carroll is a 3-year deal. And I have heard from multiple people last week at the Super Bowl, talking to executives and team people and NFL league sources, all kinds of people that know Pete extremely well. And multiple of them have talked to Pete and said he is not approaching it like he's got a 3-year deal. He's approaching it like he's got a 10-year deal and he's going to be there forever, which is Pete Carroll. You just have to know the man, his energy level, his excitement. One guy who's known Pete a long time said, I have never seen him this excited about any job. I thought that was very, very telling. And so, but they said they know he understands when he went to USC, there was a lot of people that thought he was damaged goods. And when he goes to Seattle, a lot of people are like his shtick, and it's not a shtick, it's because a shtick is something fake. His shtick, though, wouldn't work in Seattle, and it certainly did. Won one Super Bowl, probably should have won another. Now, but it worked. And so in both places, he went there with a sense of urgency. He's got that sense of urgency. In fact, one person that knows Pete super well, I mentioned to him that someone told me about how he coaches with a sense of urgency when he went to USC and went to Seattle. And they told me that they believe if there's a bigger difference between the successful Pete Carroll and the guy that failed a couple of times, it's that they thought his first couple of opportunities, he maybe approached it like, okay, they want me. I'm going to be here long term, a chance to build. And then when he went to USC, he kind of knew, okay, I'm going to have to get off to a fast start. And that is the way he's approaching this job. So his staff's announced. I want to talk about some of it. And what I really liked is, Chip Kelly comes in. Now, I don't think Chip Kelly, um, you know what? He had some good years. Let's give him credit in Philly. Not great years, but good years. And he had some really, really good years at Oregon. Outside of there, Chip Kelly, I think it is fair to call him a okay to average head coach. That's 100% fair. But as an offensive mind and a creator, he is tremendous. And some guys just aren't great in a head coaching role. I've talked to several people that said, if he had stayed at Ohio State and had, won another national championship, that he would have gotten a Division I school, but probably not a powerhouse. It would have been something that he'd have to go to and build a little bit. Like not a UNLV or not a Eastern Michigan job, but probably Illinois or an Indiana or a Cal Berkeley type place. Again, a Division I, but not a powerhouse. But when it comes to offensive ability, no doubt. We've seen Chip Kelly be tremendously successful with a ton of talent, like he had Ohio State this year. And we've seen him be successful offensively without a ton of talent. And that is, and again, I mentioned this before, but I'm going to go back to it. I thought one of the most brilliant things he said at his opening press conference is, it's my job to put my guys in a position to succeed and then to mask what they don't do well. So as the Raiders go through this quarterback situation and they determine quarterback and personnel and what are they going to do, I don't think it's really fair right now. I had one guy that I asked. I said, how would you describe what Chip's going to run? And he said something I thought was very fascinating. He said, I, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, I don't think Chip knows I think he knows what he wants to run. But he said one of Chip's strength is he is not one of those guys that this is what I want to run. This is what I'm going to do. If I don't have the personnel, I'm not doing it. I'm just going to have to keep acquiring personnel till I get to be able to do what I want. And I said, give me an example. He says, I'll give you a great one. He goes, John Gruden is an awesome offensive coach. But how many times did you watch John Gruden and you knew what he was going to do because you knew what he wanted to do, but he wasn't in a position to do it? And, John just refused to bend a little bit. And he goes, Chip's really the opposite. He's a great offensive mind. And he's like, okay, this is what I have. And I'm going to work with that. Now, a couple of guys I want to talk about, and there's a lot of really good guys on this staff, but there's a couple that I thought really deserved. And first of all, Coach McCullough, Coach D, the running backs coach out of Notre Dame. This was a coup. That was straight gangster by the Raiders. This is a guy that a lot of people thought was on the fast track to becoming a coordinator in college and a head coach. This is a rising young star. He is Coach McCullough is the real deal, folks. This wounded Notre Dame badly. I'm told by people, I talked to people at Notre Dame that told me was very actively involved in scheming, play design, all kinds of stuff. They said he is a often. In fact, I'm very good friends with some people in the athletic department who told me that that one was a stinger. That one really, really hurt. And so to get him was very, very big deal. But I want to talk about two other guys, actually three other guys. I want to talk about bringing Greg Olson back. There was a lot of consternation in Raider Nation about Greg Olson coming back, and I didn't understand it. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think that the Raiders had the most success in the world under Greg Olson. That's not a secret. But I don't think that was Greg Olson's issue. Greg Olson is a very good coach. He's a very good man. And you just got a guy who's a very solid, good coach. And the Raiders are going to give him a lot to work with. I I don't have any issues with this. In fact, I think the Raiders could have done a lot worse. Well, we know that. Just go back and look at last year. Anyways, Greg Olson was a good one. But how about Joe Philbin? This is a man so incredibly respected around football. Joe Philbin is a gift. And Pete Carroll keeping him as a senior offensive assistant cannot be underrated. Look at what he did with the offensive line. And let me go back and talk about that for a minute because you bring in uh you know Andy Dickerson, who's going to work with that offensive line. That's going to be a super big deal. And then, you got uh, Brennan Carroll, who's Pete's son, going to work with the offensive line. But you got Joe Philbin, who's just going to be there and his presence, but he's also going to be doing a lot offensively. Joe Philbin is a offensive football genius. Genius. In fact, I'm putting him up there with the same level as a Chip Kelly. And if I was a Raider fan, had they hired Philbin to be the OC, that wouldn't have bothered me in the least bit. In the least bit. So I really like this staff. And then Luke Steckel, the stays at the tight end. This guy's a great rising young coach. And Pete Carroll. I mean, what a mix here. He's got some really good young guys. He's got some really strong, experienced guys. Again, best staff top to bottom since I've gotten here in 6 years. But then let's go to defense. Okay. Patrick Graham, Robbie Leonard. I mean, Robbie Leonard should be a defensive coordinator right now. Patrick Graham should be a head coach. And if Patrick were to get a job, and we know he's been a finalist for the Seahawks and the Jags. In fact, I was told that the Jags he was doing a second interview. They were discussing the hiring with him. And then Liam Cohn called. And they really wanted Cohn over Patrick because they'd invested $250 million in Trevor Lawrence. Which makes sense. Makes sense. You got Patrick Graham and Robbie Leonard. John Glenn's into coach linebackers. Great hire there. This is a guy that he is a no-nonsense, different than Robbie Leonard, same approach. That was a great hire. In fact, I was told by somebody that may be the underrated hire of Pete Carroll's staff. But then you come back and you look at, Marcus Robertson. Really, really good hire there. Marcus Robertson comes in. He's going to work with your defensive backs. This is a guy that understands teaching. I asked someone, well, how would you describe Marcus? And they said he was the most thorough teacher they had ever been around. And this somebody's been around a lot of people. And they go, he is going to be great for such a young Raiders defensive backfield. But the guy I want to talk about is Joe Woods. So Joe Woods comes in, and I've got some experience with Joe. So I think very highly of Joe Woods. Tremendous guy. He thinks outside the box. He's a defensive assistant. He's going to work with defensive backs. But I really like the way Joe Woods thinks. Remember, I told you Pete Carroll was putting together a staff of tinkerers and thinkers. Well, that's what you got with Joe Woods. I have personal stuff there with him, and I can tell you there's nobody that's worked with Joe Woods that has an ill word to say about that guy. Everywhere he has been, he's made the place better, and he's been in some real crap holes, and he has made them better. I really like the fact they kept Tom McMahon. I don't have enough praise for Tom McMahon. I as special teams coordinator. And what I would ask anyone around the NFL is show me an NFL team with 3 better coordinators. Show me one. There are some teams that I think are as good. Maybe 1 or 2. There are some teams that are close, but there's nobody better than what the Raiders have. And I think this is important because I think all of this speaks to the character of Pete Carroll. He brings in guys. Now, one of the things that people love about Pete Carroll, who've coached for him, with him, and have played for him, have all told me, is that he empowers people. He wants his guys empowered. Now, I know for a fact Tom McMahon wants that. Patrick Graham wants that. I have not worked, or covered a team with Chip Kelly. But I'm told by people at Ohio State. Now, I'm told at UCLA he wasn't this way. And I'm told that at Philly he wasn't this way and was not this way at Oregon. But people that I know who coached with him, who I trust at Ohio State, told me one guy in particular didn't coach with him at the previous stops, but knew him and is close to him. He said he had really evolved by time he got here. And that's where the tinkering comes in. But Patrick Graham and Tom McMahon love it when guys show up in their office, watch film with them, bring suggestions, and take ownership. And I'm told that's exactly what happened at Ohio State. The Ohio State offense went through a little lull, and that he was able to talk to guys, listen to guys, and that's how he really took them out of the lull and led them to a national title. In fact, one person at Ohio State that I know very, very well said to me, had he not been that way, we wouldn't have won it. And he really told me, he goes, I think it's a shame that he probably wouldn't get a big time job. And he goes, because I really think he has matured, grown. And he goes, I think he's a top coach right now. So I think those are really some fascinating things that as we talk about this staff, I think it's important to put all that down and to really resonate with us. What is this team doing? What's this team putting together? How are they building? And I think it allows Pete Carroll to walk in to free agents, walk into kids, I say kids, guys that are still in the building and say, look at the staff I'm building. We I heard it said one time, and I wish I could remember who told this to me. I don't remember, but I don't want to take credit for it. But it's basically a leader without a following is a guy on a walk. That that may have been Bo Schembechler who told me that, but I don't remember. So it was Bo Schembechler, but I think it was Bo. But basically, it's not just being a man on a walk. And if you want guys to follow you, they've got to be bought in. My father used to always teach because he was such a great dad. And I'll never forget, my first child was about to be born, and I was really nervous. And I said, Dad, you were such a great dad, and I'm nervous about that. And he looked at me and he said, you want to know what the key to being a good dad is? I said, what? He said, anybody can go out and tell their kids what to do. And he goes, did I do that with you? I said, no, not really. He goes, but a dad shows them. And I remember multiple times my dad, I say multiple, twice in my life where my father came to me and said, I failed and I want you to forgive me. I remember being a 17-year-old kid, and we're in the middle of a giant way grocery store. And he fell to his knees and started crying and just hugged me, put his head right on my belly and hugged me. And I don't have time to tell you the story, and you probably wouldn't care. And he just looked at me and goes, I love you, son, and I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? I said, of course, Dad. I love you. And he, when I asked him that, he said, do you remember that day I apologized to you? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I wanted to show you guys how to grow up. And he goes, if I wanted my sons to be attentive to their children, then I needed to be attentive to you. He said, if I wanted my sons to honor God, then I needed to honor God. If I wanted my sons to love their wives, then I needed to love your mama. And the point was, he said, if I wanted my sons to realize you work as hard as you have to work as a husband to provide for your family. I remember my dad would work late and he'd call and he'd say, son, I'm not going to be there to put you in bed tonight, but I'm working hard to provide for our family. I just want you to know I love you. If he was not home when we went to bed, he always called. Now, when we were older and we were at a dance or whatever, he didn't. But my point was, if he was away or working late, and not home. It was always a phone call with, or we'd say, hey, he'd say, call me before you go to bed. I love you. Do you know why I'm not there? Yes, sir. Why? Because you're providing for us. And the point is that's leadership. That's leadership. America's so divided with Republican, Democrat, whatever. And I've often said, and I'm neither. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. Um, I doesn't mean I don't vote and I'm not involved, but I'm just neither. I've always said, I want leaders. And leaders don't take polls and say, okay, I'm going to believe this way because that's what the poll said. A leader says, hey, this is what's right. We're going to do what's right. And then you follow. And that is what Pete Carroll has effectively built on his staff. He's built leaders. He's built guys that are going to listen. Pete Carroll's going to walk through that locker room, which is sacred. He's going to call guys up in his office. He's going to want to hear from the captains. His coordinators are Patrick Graham is already that way, and he is going to want that. And because it's what he wants, that's what he's asking these guys he hires. Now, I want to address one thing because I heard a lot of people talking about Pete hiring his kids. I got no issue with it. I had no issue with Antonio Pierce hiring his kids. I have no problem with that. In fact, my dad used to always say, he ran a company. He'd say, I love it when dads hire their kids because that dad knows if those kids fail, I'm going to blame you. And those dads will hold their kids to a higher standard. I believe that. Does every dad do that? No, come on. We live in the real world. But I think most do, and good dads do. And I'll tell you one thing about Pete Carroll. If you don't like him as a coach, which I don't understand, he is a tremendous father. And his kids have his work ethic, his integrity. Somebody that knows that family really well, who I know, who I respect, said to me, his kids operate with the same integrity and character that he does. And Pete's always got his wife around. He's always got his family around. They were just raised in it. And he told me, he said, Pete Carroll's kids are going to be the hardest workers because he's going to tell them, if you want to come work for me, you got to set that standard because I can't let you do less. I need more from you than what I'm going to expect. So I have no issue with it. I think this top to bottom was an A staff, absolute A staff, tremendous, tremendous staff. I think it set the Raiders up for some real success. Now, got a really good podcast tomorrow and Friday, of course. Saturday and Sunday, great podcasts coming with some good information. But Monday, a very special podcast. If you miss it, you're going to regret it. It's going to be the podcast people are talking about on Monday. Make sure you check it out. God bless you, everybody.